Africa Enlightenment Center, religious, political, and social enlightenment.
7 things I've learned since I left Christianity.
Hello, welcome to Africa Enlightenment Center. In this video, Kristi shares 7 important things she learned after leaving religion. And I think you should watch this video to the end to learn these 7 important things. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and share this video for others to learn also.
Let's jump into it. The first thing that I've learned since leaving Christianity is that the world is not black and white. The church would have you believe that there is a right and a wrong. There is good and there is bad. There is black and there is white, and there is nothing in between. But my experience tells me that's just not the case. Since I left Christianity, the world has become so much more colorful. I see all of the shades in between. I've realized that there are not always absolute or objective answers to life's greatest questions or life's biggest ethical dilemmas. Embracing this complexity of life, this nuanced look, has really given me a fresh perspective on life. It's really helped better shape my understanding of morality and truth, which is just not as concrete and black and white as the church would have us believe. And really, society, we live in a society of right and wrong, and I just wish we could have so many more conversations about the nuance of it all. So the second thing that I've learned since leaving Christianity is that if there's a God and God exists and God wants me to find him or her or them, that I would have already found them. And this has really helped me in my journey of overcoming a lot of the guilt or the shame or the fear of hell or consequences from a God who demands that I worship them in order to be saved or to have an afterlife. I spent so many years of my childhood believing that I knew God. I knew who God was. And when I got to a point where I realized I don't think I really know God, that the God that I'm being taught doesn't align with my logic, it doesn't align with my sensibilities, I became very lost. I was raised in a church that taught me that the single most important thing you could ever do in life is find God. And even outside of the Christian bubble, I think that this is a very common belief, even for people who might not be Christian or maybe are just spiritual. They have this idea that God must be sought. I get people in my comments that say, I'm not a Christian, but it's not really good to be an atheist. You should keep seeking God. It's very important. And while I don't deny that plenty of people find a lot of value in their relationship or journey with God, I think it's so interesting that to most people, or to many people, the most important thing is finding God. People come up with so many different ideas of who God is. It really seems very subjective and up to the individual, doesn't it? But I did fall into this trap of believing that I needed to find God. So when I left the Christian church, my journey didn't stop there. I didn't leave Christianity and become an atheist. It was actually several years of me seeking out other alternative Christianities, alternative religions, alternative spiritualities, and trying to find what was the truth. And I spent so many nights, countless nights, days, praying to whoever was out there and saying, God, if you were there, I am looking for you. I am begging you to reveal yourself. Please show up in my life. Show me the truth. This is so important and I want to find you. And nothing. I didn't get an answer. I wasn't drawn to any particular belief or religion. I didn't have a sign. I didn't get any kind of a feeling, and I never received any kind of confirmation that there was a specific truth that I was supposed to align with. And so I got to a point where I realized that if God did exist, and let's say it's the Christian God, and he wanted me to find him, that I did everything I could. I could look at myself at the end of the day in the mirror and say, I did the best I could. I tried to find God. I sought him and I begged him. And if that's not good enough for God, then God's either kind of an asshole or he just doesn't exist. I know how genuine I was. You, if you were on that same journey, if you were deconstructing, you know how genuine you've been. You know how authentic your search has been for God. And I'm sure you, like me, have prayed many, many times for God to reveal himself. And maybe he's not doing that. So just because other people think that you're doing something wrong, if you know you've been genuine and you have sought God and you have not found God, what more can you really do? Moving on, the next thing I learned since leaving Christianity is that it's okay to say, I don't know. We live in a culture of needing definitive answers, needing objective truths and objective determinations about morality, about God, about our purpose and our meaning and what comes next in the afterlife. Living in the unknown is very, very scary. It is. A lot of people don't want to live in the unknown. They want answers. And I'm one of those people. I am an incredibly curious person. I don't like not having the answers to things. And especially when you're raised in a fundamentalist religion that teaches you that you have all of the answers, that you know where you came from, you know who created you, you know your meaning and purpose, you know where you're going when you die. You go from having all of the answers to questioning your faith and realizing you don't have any answers, you don't know anything. That is very alarming to the system. And so the natural thing to do is to try to find those answers. In my conversations with Christians who are trying to prove God to me, I might say that I'm an atheist. I don't believe in God. And Christians might come back with, well, who do you think created us? Where do you think this universe came from? Where are you going when you die? And I say, I don't know. I really don't know. That's the most honest answer I can give, is I do not know. And Christians see this as like a type of gotcha. You know, they say, ha, see, you don't know. You don't know where you came from. You don't know where you're going. Well, I do. And so you must be wrong and I must be right. But giving an answer doesn't make it the right answer. And I think I've talked about this in previous videos too, that just because you've come up with a solution that lacks evidence and it's comfortable to you doesn't make it the right answer, doesn't make it the objective truth. So I had to get comfortable saying, I just don't know. And not knowing doesn't put you in any kind of an inferior position. It doesn't mean that the Christian knows more than you do, because Christians will claim to know things that they don't actually know. They will claim to know things that they believe on faith. And faith is just belief without evidence. If you had evidence, you wouldn't need faith. Believing something on faith, it doesn't make you right. It just makes you comfortable. And that's okay. But it doesn't mean that me not knowing makes me wrong in my atheism or my lack of belief. So the next thing I learned is that love does not threaten or condemn. Hell is a very scary threat. And whether Christians believe that hell is eternal suffering, temporary suffering, or just eternal separation from all that is light and good, it's a scary threat. Nobody wants to go there. And yet Christians persistently threaten other people with it. I struggle a lot knowing that most of my family and people I used to attend church with believe that I deserve to go to hell. And not only that, but they worship and love the God that they believe will send me there. But I also have to recognize that they also believe that they deserve to go to hell and that they love and worship a God who has threatened to send them there. And I just think that that's so sad, that their most definitive example of love comes with conditions and condemnation. That in order for them to be loved by their God, to not be threatened by their God, they must worship and believe in him. They must do what he says. They must obey him. They have been coerced into loving God because they don't have any other option. It's not a choice. You either love me or you are eternally tortured or eternally condemned. That's not really a choice. It's coercion. I'm married, and if on my wedding day, when my husband and I were exchanging vows, my husband would have looked me in the eyes and said, I love you, and you're gonna love me. And if you don't love me, I'm gonna build a burn pit in the backyard and I'm gonna drag you into it and you're gonna suffer. I would hope that everyone at the wedding would have spoken up rather than holding their peace, okay? Because that's not love. It turns into this obligation that you must love and worship God no matter how you feel about him, no matter what you think about the Bible, no matter what you think about the way he behaves or the way he treats humanity. You just gotta fall in line, because if you don't, you're gonna be tortured eternally. Anyone in their right mind can see how abusive that is in my relationship with my husband in that context. But so few people recognize how abusive it is in the context of a relationship with God. If God truly loves you, if he really does love you, he would never threaten you. He would never condemn you. And if your family really loves you, if the people from your church really love you, they're not going to threaten you or condemn you either. If they are trying to save your soul and they're claiming it's because they love you and they're throwing out all these tactics and they're threatening you with hell, they're probably doing it because they're scared. They're doing it out of a fear, but they're not doing it out of love. It's not love, because love doesn't make you feel as though you have to be there. Love doesn't threaten you with all kinds of terrible things if you don't worship the one that is requiring your love. So the next thing I learned is that feelings do actually matter. And that kind of seems like common sense, something everyone should think and know. But when it comes to being raised in a fundamentalist environment, you're not really told that your feelings are important or that they matter, especially if your feelings go against whatever God or the church wants for you. I learned a long time ago that when the church tells you not to go against God or to do whatever God says, it's really just code for do whatever the church says, because all the churches have their own ways of practicing things. They're not all following the Bible the same way. They make up their own rules, and you're supposed to abide by that no matter what. I was taught over and over again in Sunday school and youth group to disregard my feelings. Get rid of my own desires, my own wants, my own needs. They don't matter. I need to die to myself so that Jesus can live through me. He can be a bright, shining light through my vessel. And isn't that just such a terrible thing to teach to children and adults alike? That their feelings don't matter, that what they think inside, what they feel inside is to be disregarded. How cruel is a God who creates you, who gives you the ability to feel, the ability to have desires and intuition, but then expects you to disregard all that in favor for whatever a book says. Can our feelings lie to us? Sure. Can our feelings mislead us? Yeah, I think so. For example, leaving the church, I had a lot of feelings of guilt and shame and negative self-talk and self-doubt. And though I felt guilty, I was not guilty of anything but living my most authentic life. Following my heart, that's what I was guilty of. But I felt guilty. I felt the shame, and that was placed upon me by the religion, and I had to work through that. And feeling guilty doesn't necessarily make you guilty. Feeling shame or feeling self-doubt doesn't mean that you are deserving of those feelings. And so I think in a way, feelings can often mislead you, but they aren't to be ignored. If you're having feelings, you should explore them. You should always be willing to explore them, to try to find out what your feelings are telling about you so that you can work on yourself and improving yourself to become the best version of you that you can be. Your feelings always matter. And I think it's such a dangerous thing to teach people that what they think and feel should be disregarded in favor for whatever their church teaches them. A God who gives you the ability to feel deeply, to experience these feelings, and then tells you to disregard them is not a very kind or loving God. And the same goes for any church who tells you to do the same. Faith is not a virtue. I would like to repeat that. Faith is not a virtue. Maybe it's a virtue to you, but this is about what I've learned since leaving Christianity, and I can tell you for certain that faith is not on my list of virtues. Virtue, by definition, is behavior that shows you have a high moral standing. I noticed with the people in my church that if you claim to have faith, you were good in their book. If you were a man of God, that's all that mattered. And it didn't matter how you treated other people. It didn't matter how you behaved. It didn't matter how you treated your spouse. As long as you claimed the faith, that was it. That's all you really needed, was to believe. And to me, belief is like the worst measure for morality. I mean, think about how many pastors abuse children in churches. They have faith. How many husbands who abuse their wives have faith? Plenty of people have faith that don't have high moral standards. But for some reason, there's this idea within our culture and within the church that if you have faith, you automatically have some kind of moral standing that people without faith, they just don't have. There's just this wild concept that when I say I'm an atheist, people automatically think, oh, well, you lack moral values. How could you be moral? How could you be a good person if you don't even have faith in God? And I don't even know how those two things could be connected, because some of the best people I've ever met and have ever known have been people who don't have faith. And some of the worst, most hateful, most self-involved people I've ever met are people of faith. And last but not least, on my list of things that I've learned since I've left Christianity is that introspection builds compassion. I say this because I was raised to believe that any kind of self-reflection, any kind of introspection that didn't involve my relationship with God and was just kind of focused on me and what I thought, what I felt, what I wanted, was inherently selfish and sinful and bad. I remember after I left Christianity, I had a family member that asked something along the lines of, you don't believe in that self-love, self-help crap, do you? At the time, I didn't realize what a damaging message that was. But now when I look back on it, I am floored that people actually believe that self-love, self-compassion, introspection, and just self-reflection is generally a bad or sinful thing to do. And I think this is one of the greatest disservices that churches do to their members, is they discourage them from looking within, outside of the context of their relationship with God. They discourage activities that would keep you from getting to know who you really are, because you're not supposed to know who you are. You're supposed to disregard who you are in favor of whoever God is and let him live instead of you. And so this dismissal of your identity is so damaging to so many people. And I think it holds people back from being able to be compassionate and empathetic. What they don't realize is that self-reflection and introspection and self-love is the quickest way to love other people. If you cannot learn how to show yourself compassion for your screw ups, for your flaws, for your mishaps, if you can't show yourself grace and compassion, you're not going to have the space and capacity, or really the desire, to show that same grace and compassion to other people. I used to shame myself. I used to get into these cycles of negative self-talk, and all that did was kept me from being able to be compassionate to me when I felt like I wasn't living up to my own standards. So when you see other people not living up to the standards you think they should, are you going to have compassion on them? If you're sitting there shaming yourself and making yourself feel bad for what you do, who you are, how are you going to be able to extend compassion to other people? The more I get to know myself, the more I learn about myself, why I am the way I am, how my pain, how my trauma, my experiences have shaped me as a person, it gives me the space to go easy on myself, to be more compassionate and understanding about where I've come from and why I am the way I am. And when we can do that with ourselves, it's so much easier to look at other people and say, they're not acting in a way that is really nice, but maybe they've been through something like I have. Maybe they have some pain that has shaped them and has put them in a bad place. Maybe they're going through something. Maybe I should show them some grace and compassion like I've shown myself. When you grow up learning that that is inherently selfish, it's a very difficult thing to do. It's a difficult thing to learn to do, and it's not very comfortable. But over time, it gets a lot easier, and I feel like it just expands your ability to empathize for other people and to understand that we're all coming from some kind of pain. We're all coming from experiences that have uniquely shaped us, and maybe we could all take some time to extend some compassion, extend some grace and understanding and empathy, and really meet people where they are. To me, personally, in my life, building my relationship with myself and actually learning to truly love myself has expanded my capacity to empathize and to show compassion to other people. And had I stayed in the church, I would have never been given that opportunity to really get to know me, who I am, and to love myself. And I think that's so important. We all should love ourselves. We should all get to know ourselves. And if there's something about ourselves that we don't like, we can examine that, we can work on it, we can improve, and then we can be proud of ourselves for overcoming it. And in the same way, we can extend that same grace to other people. And I have to say, there are so many things that I have learned since I left Christianity, and this list is not comprehensive, and I could even think of things as I was talking that I would love to add, but I think that this is a good starting list, and I think it might help people who are deconstructing, perhaps newly deconstructing, or even long into their journey, really examine what the church taught them versus what they believe now, and gain perhaps a fresh perspective. Because a lot of times when you leave fundamentalist religion, you don't just abandon your fundamentalist thinking. Those thoughts, the indoctrination, it really kind of stays embedded in there, and it can kind of seep into the deepest parts of your brain and just live there. So it's really important to kind of step outside of where you've been to gain a fresh perspective and to kind of see things a different way than you always have, because you might be surprised by what you find.